Chapter 1051. Ing Luo? Ing Luo? Wei Xingliang called out to Gu Shengyin with some dissatisfaction. Was his charm that bad? He turned over and leaned over Gu Shengyin's body, hatefully biting Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin came back to her senses, looking at Wei Xingliang, who seemed to be in a very bad mood with some bafflement. What's the matter? You're still not happy after eating meat? Her misty eyes made the dark fire in Wei Xingliang's heart quietly dissipate. He sighed, gently licking the place he had just bitten with the tip of his tongue. He really didn't know what to do with her. That's right, big brother. Gu Shengyin suddenly asked, if we want to destroy the Vampire Hunter Association, will it be difficult? Wei Xingliang's movements paused, asking, why did you suddenly think of this? He immediately thought of that stupid vampire hunter during the day. Was Ing Luo so angry? Since Ing Luo didn't like it, then there was no use keeping the Vampire Hunter Association. He said carelessly, Vampire Hunter Association? That's the group that wants to destroy us vampires all day in the name of justice? They're just a bunch of mobs. If we really want to make a move, our Weixing family is enough. Gu Shengyin was secretly happy. But Wei Xingliang frowned. There are several high-level members in the Vampire Hunter Association who seem to have connections with other pure-blood families. Gu Shengyin knew about this. When she read the original plot, she knew that the Vampire Hunter Association wasn't as righteous as they said. On the contrary, the association was divided into two factions, the radical faction and the moderate faction. The radical faction advocated that vampires and vampires couldn't coexist, and must be killed on sight. Like Xiao Zhongguo from before, he was a member of the radical faction. But the moderate faction was different. They had always strived to find a point where humans and vampires could live in harmony, and this had always been their goal for so many years. Both sides had always been committed to internal strife for their own interests, and had no achievements in dealing with vampires. In fact, many of the vampire hunters in the Vampire Hunters Association had already been contacted by some vampire nobles in private. Every time there was a big movement in the Vampire Hunter Association, a few of the vampire nobles would receive the news long in advance. Perhaps Xiao Zhongguo died without knowing that the Vampire Hunter Association, which had always been synonymous with justice and fearlessness in her heart, was actually so filthy. Gu Shengyin carefully thought again, and felt that dealing with such an organization didn't seem too difficult. System, I accept the mission. The system had mentioned before that this kind of additional mission would allow him to receive more souls after completing it. It was still profitable. Wei Xingliang looked up and saw that Gu Shengyin had fallen silent again. She thought that Gu Shengyin was dissatisfied with her words. He reached out and stroked Gu Shengyin's long and smooth black hair, coaxing softly, okay, if you really don't like the Vampire Hunter Association, I'll go visit those families tomorrow and let them know in advance. He had originally thought that it would be quite troublesome. The existence of the Vampire Hunters Association would at most have some effect on some low-level vampires. 4 pure-blooded nobles like them, those people were just playing monkeys, and would not pose any threat to them at all. But who told Ing Luo not to like it? He thought somewhat helplessly, girls are really very delicate. But unfortunately, he loved this delicate side of her. Chapter 1052. The next day, Gu Shengyin went to school. Of course, Xiao Zhongguo wouldn't come. And none of the students in the class were interested in her. After all, she was just a newcomer who had left a bad impression on everyone, so no one was in the mood to pay attention to her. Gu Shengyin wasn't worried about anything else. The Vampire Hunter Association would definitely take care of everything. Sure enough, when the homeroom teacher came in, there wasn't any unnatural expression on her face. Students, the newcomer yesterday, Xiao Zhongguo, can't continue to study in our class because of family reasons. Oh, a few people dragged out their words to show that they understood. The homeroom teacher didn't mind, and just announced the start of class. After school, Gu Shengyin saw a familiar car at the school gate. But there wasn't a driver waiting for her in the driver's seat, but a tall man leaning against the car. Wow! Ing Luo, is that your car? Who's that handsome guy? The girl walking beside Gu Shengyin looked at Wei Xingliang with shining eyes. This appearance, this figure, this temperament, he was simply the best among men. Gu Shengyin looked at her brother with some appreciation, and then smiled at the girl. My fiancé. The girl immediately retracted her gaze from Wei Xingliang. If that handsome guy didn't have an owner, she wouldn't mind striking up a conversation and getting his contact information. Maybe even a romantic relationship would start. But, if he was someone else's fiancé, the girl shrugged. Forget it, don't provoke someone who already has an owner, that's the most basic principle. Then see you tomorrow, Ing Luo. The girl winked at Gu Shengyin. Then she lowered her voice and said mysteriously, You're so lucky, your fiancé is so handsome, he even personally picked you up from school. She left enviously. Gu Shengyin walked towards Wei Xingliang. As soon as she came to his side, Wei Xingliang very naturally took her backpack with one hand, and skillfully pulled her hand into his embrace with the other. A passionate kiss landed on her lips. Wow. Cool. There were many people coming and going at the school gate. Many students and passers-by saw this scene. The students loved to watch a good show and weren't afraid of things getting out of hand. A few of them even started to clap and whistle. Gu Shengyin was kissed until she was dizzy. She glanced at the people around her and saw that they were all looking at her with burning eyes. So many people are watching, she said in a low voice. She meant for him to be more careful. Wei Xingliang looked at her and smiled. I'm your fiancé, and you're my fiancé. What's wrong with us doing this? Just now, the conversation between Ing Luo and that girl, although their voices weren't loud, he heard every single word. Hearing her proclaim that he was her fiancé, Wei Xingliang felt that the cold blood in his body, which was unique to vampires, seemed to be boiling. Ing Luo, she could always control his emotions so easily. The two of them entered the car. Gu Shengyin realized that the car did not seem to be heading home. Where are we going? She was puzzled. Wei Xingliang turned his head and glanced at her. Don't you want to destroy the Vampire Hunter Association? I'll take you to meet a few people. Vomiting blood. There were 3 more updates before 12 o'clock. Please vote. Chapter 1053. For Wei Xingliang to meet him personally, it was naturally a vampire of equal status. With such status, and a vampire known for his extravagant lifestyle, Gu Shengyin could already foresee the scene of a tycoon. The result was as expected. The address was in the castle of another pure-blood vampire family, the Beitang family. When Wei Xingliang and Gu Shengyin arrived, the entire castle was already brightly lit. Faint noises could be heard from inside. A waiter respectfully came forward and led the two of them through the castle's gate. The scene before them appeared before their eyes. Almost at the same time, Wei Xingliang turned sideways, blocking Gu Shengyin's line of sight. Don't look. Then, a huge pressure belonging to a pure blood swept through the entire hall. The vampires who were partying on the dance floor all knelt down, trembling. They didn't understand why this master was suddenly angry. Get out of here, Wei Xingliang said coldly. None of the vampires dared to say a word, and they hurriedly left through the gate. In the blink of an eye, the only sound left in the hall was the music. The noisy and rhythmic music suddenly stopped, and at the same time, a lazy male voice sounded from the second floor. You're still so cold, Liang. There were quite a few beauties at the ball just now. Gu Shengyin looked up and saw a boy with short silver hair nimbly jump down from the balcony on the second floor. So you brought someone. The silver-haired boy glanced at Gu Shengyin, a trace of surprise flashing through his eyes. This is the princess of the Weixing family, Miss Ing Luo, right? Hello, I'm Beitang Sun. Gu Shengyin smiled and greeted him. Beitang Sun was a famous playboy among the pure-blood nobles. It was said that he changed girlfriends faster than he changed clothes. However, he was powerful and had a noble bloodline. Even though he was known as a playboy, there were still countless female vampires who wanted to get close to him and have a good time with him. Wei Xingliang didn't want his sister to have too much contact with him, so he changed the topic. Where are the others? This others was the representative of the other two pure-blood noble families. Beitang soon looked upstairs. They're all here. They're upstairs. There were only 4 pure-blooded vampire families left in the world. The Weishing family, the Beitang family, the Fujiwara family, and the Suzumiya family. Of the 4 clans, the Weishing clan was the most powerful. Therefore, when Weishing Liang proposed a meeting, the other families could not refuse. Fujiwara Shizuru from the Fujiwara family and Gu Shengyin from the Suzumiya family had both met before, which saved him the trouble of introducing them. After the 5 of them were seated, Weishing Liang went straight to the point. I'm here today to talk to you about the Vampire Hunter Association. Shizuru Fujiwara was an extremely charming and seductive woman. She raised her eyebrows lazily. Vampire Hunter Association? What kind of organization is this? A few bored humans formed to deal with us? What happened to them? Weishing Liang glanced at her. Tongtong Jing's personality was the most arrogant among the 3 of them. She was also the only pure-blooded among the 3 who did not have any involvement with the Vampire Hunter Association. The reason she didn't have any involvement was very simple. She looked down on humans. She even looked down on mixed-blooded vampires, let alone humans who were inferior in the eyes of vampires. Weishing Liang said in a low voice, I'm here today to tell you that the Weishing clan is preparing to make a move against the Vampire Hunter Association. Speaking of which, don't you think that the names in this story are very, elementary school style? Gao Lengji expressed that she had racked her brains and thought for a long time before coming up with this name. Chapter 1054. Shizua Fujiwara didn't react to Weishing Liang's words. But it was different for Beitang Sun and Ryagakuwa. Beitang Sun's lazy expression finally turned serious. He looked at Weishing Liang. What's wrong, Liang? Did those vampire hunters provoke you? Weishing Liang said in a cold voice, There are vampire hunters trying to kill Ying Luo. If we don't teach them a lesson, those humans who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth won't know their place. Beitang Sun looked strangely at Gu Shengyin, who had been silently sitting next to Weishing Liang. He knew the power of a pure blood. An ordinary vampire hunter couldn't do anything to a pure blood like Weishing Ying Luo. But Weishing Liang was furious. He didn't want to let the Vampire Hunter Association off just because his sister was fine. Beitang Xuandai thought about it for a moment. What if she had a younger sister, and she was targeted by the Vampire Association, and they even came to attack her? His reaction would be... He was silent for a moment. What do you want to do? Absolutely intolerable. Ryagakuwa looked at Weishing Liang. Weishing Liang smiled coldly. What do I want to do? Uproot them, of course. Beitang Sun was shocked. That's not necessary, right? They just offended Miss Ying Luo. Just teach them a lesson. He had spent a lot of effort to cultivate several spies in the association. He didn't want to see this happen. Ryagakuwa frowned. Your Weishing family doesn't have any business in the association, so you don't feel bad. But our Ryagakuwa family is different. Weishing Liang's attitude was firm. I'm here today to inform you in advance. Whether you agree or not, the Weishing family will act according to plan. Beitang Sun and Ryagakuwa didn't look too good. Only Shizua Fujiwara clapped her hands. I, Shizua Fujiwara, only have one thing to say. If a man can't even take revenge when his sister and lover are bullied, what kind of man is he? Weishing Liang had become the head of the Weishing family ever since his parents stopped caring for him. Shizua Fujiwara smiled at Weishing Liang. Head of the Weishing family, if you need our help, please don't hesitate. Thank you. Weishing Liang nodded. At this moment, Gu Shengyin spoke. She looked at the 2 men who were obviously not looking too good and asked, Both of you have planted people in the Vampire Hunter Association. Then I would like to ask, have you received any news about the thing that the Vampire Hunter Association is secretly researching? Secret research? Ryagakuwa and Beitang Sun looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. No, they didn't get any information. Seeing this, Gu Shengyi knew what was going on. She said, "When the two of you go home, you can ask someone to investigate. Then you'll know whether I'm telling the truth or not. Are your so-called confidants in the Vampire Hunter Association really loyal to the two of you?" When she said this, her tone was flat, as if there was no extra meaning. However, in the ears of the two pure-blooded nobles, they felt extremely ashamed. Since the other party dared to say it so openly, it meant that she was confident. However, the two who claimed to have spies in the Vampire Hunter Association didn't receive any news about this. This was a blatant slap to his face. Chapter 1055. In the end, Beitang Sun still wanted to salvage the situation. "Liang, Miss Ying Luo is fine. Can you?" "No." Weisheng Liang glanced at him coldly. "It's about Ying Luo. No matter how small the matter is, we can't let it go." "You can think of it that way. Weisheng Ying Luo is my life." After saying that, he got up and took Gu Shengyi's hand to leave. "All right." He paused and said, "Next time when I come, please don't let those messy vampires in. It hurts my eyes." Beitang Sun was stunned as he watched the two walk away. Was that what he called an eyesore? Vampires were originally unrestrained and didn't have any moral integrity. It wasn't like Liang hadn't seen such gatherings overseas. Why did he suddenly dislike it? Fujiwara Shizu looked at him and sneered. "You don't believe me when I say you're stupid." Weisheng Liang's words were clearly for his sister's sake. "Didn't you see what he did first when he came in?" When Weisheng Liang and Gu Shengyi came in, they were sitting on the second floor, separated by a door and a floor. But to the purebloods, this spatial barrier was nothing. They could still see what the other party was doing. Beitang Sun carefully recalled, and his face suddenly changed. No way, Liang, he treasures his sister so much? He couldn't believe it. For a vampire who played around with women, he felt that the most incredible thing in the world was so-called true love. Fujiwara Shizu looked at his stupid face, sneered, and stood up. "Look at you two stupid faces." Weisheng Liang even said, "She's my life." "Do you still think he's joking?" "I'm leaving too. You two should think about how to get out of this quickly and minimize the losses. The Weisheng family won't stop this time." Fujiwara Shizu also left. Beitang Sun and Ryomiyakawa looked at each other silently for a while. Ryagakawa spoke up. "I'd better go home and contact the person in charge of the Vampire Hunter Association." As soon as Beitang Sun heard this, she knew that the Suzumiya family was prepared to stop. He frowned. "Are we really going to listen to the Weisheng clan? With the strength of our two clans, there's no need to." Ryomiyakawa interrupted. "Kaoru, to be fair, destroying the Vampire Hunter Association is not a bad thing for us, is it?" Beitang Sun was speechless. Of course, this was not a bad thing. No matter how much influence the two families had in the Vampire Hunters Association, the organization itself was still against all vampires. "You're right." He sighed. "I was wrong." That bit of energy and wealth was nothing to the Beitang clan. He might as well use this opportunity to curry favor with the Weisheng family. Gaining a favor from the strongest pureblood clan, the Weisheng clan, was far more valuable than anything else. On the other side, Gu Shengyi followed Weisheng Liang out of the Beitang family's castle. There was a smile on her face. She seemed very happy. "What's wrong? Why are you so happy?" Weisheng Liang couldn't help but smile. "Because my brother said that I'm your life." Gu Shengyi smiled. This wasn't the first time she'd heard this from this man. But when she heard it, she felt the same joy in her heart. This should be the last 3 chapters of the 12th update on the 11th. But Gao Langji had just finished writing and was 15 minutes late. "Sorry everyone. The 12th will be updated at 8 as usual. Finally, I'll ask for a round of votes every day." Chapter 1056. Little Fool. Wei Xingliang reached out and patted Gu Xingyin's head. He actually felt very novel. Ever since he was a child, his mother had told him that in the future, he, Wei Xingliang, would be the head of the Weixing family, and his younger sister, who was the same age as him, would be his future wife. So he had to work hard and make himself infinitely stronger. Because the women of the Weixing family were born princesses, they would receive the best protection and the best treatment. And the men of the Weixing family would always be the guardians of the women of the Weixing family. Before he was 10 years old, he and his younger sister lived together. The little Weixing Ing Luo liked to stick to this handsome and very powerful brother of his. At that time, the relationship between the brother and sister was very good. Later on, he was sent abroad by his parents for 7 years. That was almost half of his entire life. That little girl in a pink tutu who would softly call him brother in his childhood was becoming more and more blurred in his memory. He liked his younger sister, but he didn't love her. But he had never doubted that he would marry Ing Luo. This was something that was destined from birth. He would be good to her for the rest of his life, but he might not be able to give her his true heart. This was what Wei Xingliang had always thought. Until this unexpected return to the country. That little girl in his memory had become such a lively young girl. When she threw herself into his arms with a smile, his cold heart actually jumped at that moment. The young girl in his arms smiled like a flower, with an innocence that didn't know the ways of the world. But she could still wear such a smile and take someone's life without batting an eyelid. Wei Xingliang looked at this scene and felt that his body temperature had never been so high. As a vampire, he actually had the feeling that his blood was boiling because of her. He knew that he had fallen in love with her. What a strange and natural thing. He had only been back for a few days, but he already loved her to the bone. But she was his destined wife. What was wrong with falling in love with her? Brother. The young girl's puzzled voice brought him back to reality. Brother, what are you thinking about? Wei Xingliang lowered his head and looked at the young girl who was looking up at him with concern. He smiled. I'm thinking, when is the best time for me and my Ing Luo to get married? He watched as the girl's face blushed instantly because of his words. Gu Shengyin really didn't think of this. Although the two of them had done what they were supposed to do, Weixing Ingluo's body wasn't even 18 years old. Although vampires didn't care about whether they had reached adulthood or not, wasn't this a little too early? Gu Shengyin voiced her thoughts. Wei Xingliang narrowed his eyes. Too early. With a tug of his hand, he pulled her into his embrace. Weixing Ing Luo still had the appearance of a young girl. She wasn't short among humans, but she wasn't tall either. On the other hand, Wei Xingliang was tall and had long legs, broad shoulders and a slim waist. With this hug, he pulled the girl into his embrace and hid her completely, not revealing anything. Haven't you and I done everything we should? Was our marriage contract set the moment we were born? Besides marrying me, do you still think of anyone else? What's the difference between us living together now and after marriage? So, do you still think it's too early? Chapter 1057. Gu Shengyin was left speechless by Wei Xingliang's questions. It seemed that there was no difference between what he said and what he said. However, something still seemed to be amiss. Wei Xingliang smiled as he looked at his sister who was staring at him in confusion. He didn't say anything and took her hand to go home. Gu Shengyin was in a daze as she listened to Wei Xingliang call the butler over and tell him that he would be staying here for a long time. Moreover, he asked the butler to stop preparing for his and Gu Shengyin's wedding. Then, Gu Shengyin looked at the butler who had always adhered to gentlemanly etiquette and had always been elegant and perfect. Because of this news, he was so excited that he almost burst into tears. Young Master Liang, you can rest assured that I will prepare everything as soon as possible and prepare a perfect wedding for you and Miss Ing Luo. Gu Shengyin watched the butler walk out with a gust of wind, and a white halo seemed to light up above his head. He's that happy? Wei Xingliang smiled. Don't you know that for the entire vampire race, the appearance of a pureblood's marriage is something worth celebrating? And that's not the point. The point is that they look forward to the birth of the next generation the most. Wei Xingliang whispered in her ear. I'm going to rest. I have to get up early for school tomorrow. Gu Shengyin cleverly changed the topic. Such a dangerous topic, she absolutely couldn't continue. And the matter of the Vampire Hunter Association seemed to have been temporarily put on hold. Gu Shengyin asked Wei Xingliang, but Wei Xingliang only said that it wasn't time yet. Trust brother, you don't have to worry about this matter. I will take care of it. Since Wei Xingliang said such words, Gu Shengyin didn't say anything more. Anyway, the mission mentioned by the system was to destroy the Vampire Hunter Association. It didn't say that she had to do it herself. Then, as long as the result was no problem, there wouldn't be a problem. Anyway, there wouldn't be anyone in the Vampire Hunter Association who could threaten her. The next day, Wei Xingliang personally sent Gu Shengyin to school. He seemed to have fallen in love with the feeling of taking care of everything around Gu Shengyin. I'll pick you up in the afternoon. He leaned over and kissed the corner of Gu Shengyin's lips. Then, he got out of the car and opened the door for her. Gu Shengyin walked into the classroom as usual. Wei Xing Luo. An arrogant voice came from outside the classroom. Gu Shengyin looked over. A handsome boy with dyed yellow hair and silver cross-shaped earrings was looking at her. Song Hai. It was said that his family background was very powerful. In Saint Radia High School, where the rich were everywhere, his family situation could be considered to be one of the best. It was rumored that this person had a bad temper. Although he was very handsome, his reputation was not very good. Not many girls dared to provoke him. Gu Shengyin thought about it carefully. She did not know this Song Hai. In her impression, the two of them had never interacted before. Her deskmate Lily whispered to her, "Ing Luo, do you know this Song Hai?" Gu Shengyin shook her head. "I don't know." Wei Xing Ing Luo? Outside, Song Hai didn't hear any response from Gu Shengyin, so he frowned and shouted. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on her, Gu Shengyin stood up. "May I ask this classmate, why are you looking for me?" she asked. Song Hai was originally very overbearing, but when Gu Shengyin really stood in front of him, his face suddenly turned red. Gu Shengyin, she had a bad feeling in her heart. Chapter 1058. Sure enough, Song Hai turned his head away shyly and asked dryly, "I heard that you have a fiancé?" There was nothing to hide. Gu Shengyin nodded. Song Hai's expression suddenly became very strange. He seemed to want to fiercely glare at Gu Shengyin, but he subconsciously didn't want to go too far with her. The expression on his face was simply wonderful. You and him, when did this happen?" After struggling for a long time, he could only ask this question. Gu Shengyin looked at him. "Our two families decided on this marriage when we were young." Song Hai's eyes lit up. "Then do you like him?" "If you don't like him, I can." Gu Shengyin interrupted him. "Classmate Song Hai, I don't know you very well. It's very rude of you to inquire about my privacy like this. My relationship with him is very good. Please don't casually question us." Song Hai's expression became gloomy. He didn't speak. Gu Shengyin glanced around the classroom and found that many students, although holding books in their hands, still looked over from time to time. It was obvious that the students were very interested in gossip. "If there's nothing else, I'll go back to the classroom first. Class is about to start." Song Hai reached out to stop her. "Wait a minute." He stood in front of Gu Shengyin and looked at her seriously. "There are some things that I still feel like I have to tell you. I like you, Wei Xing Luo. I've liked you since the first day you entered this school." He looked somewhat powerlessly at the girl who didn't feel surprised or incredulous after hearing his words. "Perhaps it's the so-called love at first sight. But my family is very strict with me, and has also arranged for me to be a fiancé from another family since I was young, so I've never mentioned it to you. Until yesterday, when I heard people say that you kissed someone at the school gate, I couldn't help it." Song Hai looked at her seriously. "Even if I know that it's impossible for me to be with you, I still want you to know that there's a boy who has liked you for a year." Finally, I wish you happiness. Gu Shengyin finally looked up. Thank you. When the bell rang, she walked past Song Hai and into the classroom. Song Hai wasn't in a hurry to go to class. Instead, he stood there quietly, watching the delicate girl walk away without looking back, getting further and further away from him. His hands that were hanging by his side opened in vain, as if he was trying his best to hold on to something, but in the end, he could only grab a ball of air. It was something that had never belonged to him in the first place, so how could he possibly grab it? Song Hai's eyes were a little red. Finally, he turned around and left with big strides. Gu Shengyin's deskmate still wanted to gossip with her, but Gu Shengyin didn't want to use a teenage boy's crush as a topic for others to gossip about, so she brushed him off with a few words. What she didn't expect was that after school, Weixing Liang would kiss her again at the school gate. What are you doing? Gu Shengyin looked at him reproachfully. This man, did he think that she was too low-key in school? Weixing Liang's eyes intentionally or unintentionally swept across a certain place, and then gently pecked her moist red lips. Declaring sovereignty. What? Gu Shengyin felt a little strange. Her heart suddenly moved, and she suddenly saw Song Hai's figure in the crowd. Chapter 1059. Sure enough. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at Weixing Liang. How did you know? No, the point is it worth it? Weixing Liang glanced at Song Hai, who had been watching them from the crowd. As long as it's something to do with you, I know everything about it. Ying Luo, it's impossible for me to put you in a place where I can't see you. This was his paranoia. As for the second question, of course it's worth it. Daring to covet my Ying Luo for me in this world is even more unbearable than wanting to suck my blood. It was easy to imagine how precious the blood of a pure-blooded vampire was. For those low-level vampires, if they could get a trace of pure-blooded blood, it was almost equivalent to a risk-free promotion. There were even many free vampires who longed to be favored by pure-blooded vampires and willingly became their slaves. Submitting to the strong wasn't a shameful thing. What they could obtain, however, was great power and a long lifespan. Correspondingly, the pride of pure-blooded vampires was well known. No pure-blooded would easily give their blood to others. For them, blood was a symbol of noble status. And in Weixing Liang's words, there was no doubt that he put Gu Shengyin in the most important position in his heart. Even if it was just words of love, there was no woman who could resist such words of love. Gu Shengyin smiled with satisfaction. Brother, why are you so good at talking? I dare say that as long as you want, there is no woman in this world who can resist your charm and your sweet words. Weixing Liang also smiled. It's just that in this world, there is only one Ying Luo who is worthy of me showing my charm and listening to my sweet words. When he said this, in addition to a strong pampering tone, there was also an unconcealable arrogance. As he said, there was only one Weixing Ying Luo in this world. Worthy of Weixing Liang, he was willing to do everything to make her smile. Song Hai stared blankly at the two people chatting intimately. He had liked Weixing Ying Luo for more than a year and had secretly observed her for a year. He had never seen so much on her face. If he had to describe it in words, it would probably be sweet. The happiness between her eyebrows was almost overflowing. It seemed that she really liked that man. Just as he was silently staring blankly, he didn't know if it was his illusion, but he felt that the man turned his head and his gaze seemed to pause on him for a moment. It was just a glance, and there was no warning in it. It was as if it was just a casual glance, but it made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. By the time Song Hai reacted, the two of them had already gotten into the car and left. Why did you have to scare him? Gu Shengyin complained. She had clearly seen that Weixing Liang's glance was not a simple one. Song Hai would probably have nightmares for 2 days after experiencing this. Weixing Liang asked her innocently, What? What was he trying to scare? Why can't I understand what you're saying? Gu Shengyin looked at the man who had a serious expression and a smile on his face. He looked like a male god. As long as you're happy. Weixing Liang maintained his smile. Daring to covet my Ing Luo, if I don't let you taste a bit of bitterness, how can you learn your lesson? Chapter 1060. As soon as they returned to the Weixing family, the housekeeper greeted them. Miss Ing Luo, please take a look. The gowns and jewelry samples have been sent over. In addition, I've already informed Master and Madam. They will be back in 3 days, and... As soon as the housekeeper saw Gu Shengyin, he began to ramble. Gu Shengyin once again realized that she would soon be entering the hall of marriage. Although she had already been married countless times, Weixing Liang smiled as he watched his sister being helplessly dragged by the housekeeper to try on a variety of dazzling jewelry and gowns. The housekeeper turned around. Young Master Liang, you should also go to the 3rd room on the left on the 1st floor. There's a designer waiting for you. Weixing Liang, whose smile had not yet faded, was speechless. Fortunately, he always had the same elegant appearance in front of outsiders. Okay, thank you, housekeeper. Brother, I don't want to go to school. After dinner, the two walked hand in hand in the back garden of their castle. Okay, you tell the housekeeper. He'll take care of the follow-up. Weixing Liang agreed. It was Gu Shengyin's turn to be puzzled. You're not going to ask for the reason? Weixing Liang smiled. Human knowledge is of no use to us. If you don't like it, of course you won't go. Why do you need a reason? Gu Shengyin was speechless. Having a brother who unconditionally pampered you and indulged you was both sweet and sad. She laughed softly. You'll spoil me. Weixing Liang's voice was low and mellow. In the gentle night breeze, it was like the coldest wine. If I spoil you, then so be it. I'll spoil you. Who dares to say anything? Then, his hand was grabbed by Gu Shengyin. Brother, feel it carefully. A turbulent power surged in his blood. Even though there were 2 layers of skin between them, Weixing Liang could still feel the enormous power. Ing Luo. He looked at his sister with some surprise. Gu Shengyin said, I can't control this power anymore, so I don't want to go to school. You silly girl. Weixing Liang's somewhat anxious voice reached her ears. Then, Gu Shengyin felt her body being embraced in a broad embrace. It wasn't warm, but it was addictive and comforting. Don't you feel uncomfortable? Why do you care about other people's feelings? It's not a problem to wipe those people's memories. There are so many ways, but you just have to choose the one that makes you suffer the most. He scolded her with some heartache. Gu Shengyin took a deep breath of the refreshing lotus fragrance. Although she had already guessed her lover's personality, she was still very happy to hear his words for real. Feeling such a strong power in her body, his first reaction was not to suspect the source of this power, but to be concerned about whether her body was in pain. How could she let such a man? Such a man belonged to her, Gu Shengyin. Weishly, Weixing said. Weixing Liang snorted. Weixing Ing Luo, have I been too gentle with you? Do you feel uncomfortable? Gu Shengyin Weixing Liang looked at his appearance and could only compromise. Okay, actually, I still feel a little uncomfortable. Weixing Liang raised an eyebrow. A little. Gu Shengyin Weixing Liang gave up. It's actually very uncomfortable. Weixing Liang was satisfied. He said in a deep voice, Weixing Ing Luo, you have to remember that from now on, your entire body is mine. If you don't cherish your body, don't blame me for being impolite. Chapter 1061. Gu Shengyin was right. Pure-blooded nobles were powerful. Even if the vampire hunters knew about them, they wouldn't dare to provoke them. However, the low-level vampires who wandered the world at night were different. In fact, the targets of vampire hunters were often the vampires themselves. As the pure-blooded vampires, the Weixing family was like an emperor among the vampires. Naturally, they couldn't turn a blind eye to this kind of thing. Weixing Liang pondered for a moment and finally sighed. I've always sent people to keep an eye on the Vampire Hunter Association. The people who are prepared to deal with them have already been prepared. He looked at Gu Shengyin. Originally, I wanted to make a move on our wedding day as a wedding gift to you. But now, it seems that the plan will have to be brought forward. Wedding gift? Gu Shengyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Destroying an association as a wedding gift for his wife? Only the man in front of her could come up with such an idea. She smiled and said, "There's no need. It's better to get rid of a tumor like the Vampire Hunter Association as soon as possible." Seeing that Gu Shengyin had said so, Wei Xingliang didn't say anything else. He said, "The Beitang family, the Fujiwara family, and the Suzumiya family have all agreed to my suggestion. When the time comes, they will also participate in this matter. Don't worry, this time, not a single fish will escape the net from the Vampire Hunter Association." Gu Shengyin, who hadn't fought for a long time, felt a little itchy. Her eyes lit up. "I want to go too." Wei Xingliang smiled and looked at her. Just when Gu Shengyin thought that he would agree, he smiled and said, "No." Gu Shengyin. "Why?" Wei Xingliang said naturally, "You are my wife. How can I let my wife go to war? Even if the enemy was relatively weak." Wei Xingliang had been taught by his parents to protect and love his younger sister since he was young. He had long had the idea that his younger sister was weak and needed to be carefully and gently protected. Even if he knew Gu Shengyin's strength and knew that she would not encounter any danger, he was not willing to let Gu Shengyin fight with others. Gu Shengyin was naturally indignant. Wei Xingliang comforted her in a soft voice, comforting her, but she would never relent. "Ing Luo, be obedient. Big brother is worried about you." He looked at her helplessly. "You know that nothing will happen to me." Gu Shengyin didn't know what was wrong with her. She wasn't that delicate, and she didn't really want to go. Moreover, if she really wanted to go, Wei Xingliang might not be able to stop her. She was a hypocrite, enjoying Wei Xingliang's helpless look. "TSK, TSK, TSK. Gu Shengyin despised herself in her heart. See, this was the result of being spoiled. She felt like she was about to be spoiled. But in reality, she opened her mouth and took a bite of the fruit that Wei Xingliang handed to her. Gu Shengyin sighed in satisfaction. "If I'm delicate, then so be it. If I'm spoiled, then so be it." Anyway, one was willing to be beaten and the other was willing to be beaten. Who would dare to gossip? Wei Xingliang looked at his younger sister's satisfied face with a smile, his face full of undisguised tenderness. "Well, now it's time to think about it. After the Vampire Hunter Association matter is over, where will the two of them go for their honeymoon? 8 nights. Good night, everyone." Chapter 1062. Wei Xingliang acted quickly. Since he had already made preparations, he left for the headquarters of the Vampire Hunter Association on the 3rd day after the agreement with Gu Shengyin. Of course, Gu Shengyin stayed in the castle. Although she couldn't go, she had a system that could report her movements at any time. "Host, the two sides have already clashed. The Vampire Hunter Association is no match for them. The Research Institute has been uprooted. Host, your man is so handsome." Gu Shengyin, the first part was fine, but what the hell was with the last part? Wei Xingliang's trip took a long time. After the headquarters of the Vampire Hunter Association was destroyed, there were still many survivors who had escaped. These people couldn't be left alive. If you didn't get rid of the roots, they would grow again. It took almost half a month for the remnants of the vampire hunters hidden in every corner to be completely wiped out. After this matter was settled, Gu Shengyin had nothing to do with it anymore. She stretched lazily on the sofa. Recently, she had been getting lazier and lazier. The wedding of the two arrived as scheduled. The wedding of a pure-blooded aristocrat, coupled with the Weisheng family's influence in this world, was so grand that it attracted everyone's attention. Of course, they didn't hold the wedding in a church, nor did they ask a priest to be their witness. A pair of vampires asking a priest to bless them, wasn't that a joke? Although some of the guests present felt a little strange about this, they were only puzzled in their hearts. After all, it was someone else's wedding. Perhaps they wanted to do something different. Gu Shengyin got married under everyone's witness. During the day, the guests dispersed. The nightlife of the castle had just begun. Gu Shengyin and Wei Xingliang changed into more exquisite gowns. Under the witness of all the vampires, they intertwined their necks and pierced their fangs into each other's neck. This was the true mating ceremony of the vampires. Feeling the other's blood flow into their bodies, their cold hearts beat with each other's heartbeats. Gradually, the two hearts beat as one, and they could even feel each other's thoughts. Releasing his grip, the bite wound healed completely. The vampires below bowed in unison in the direction of the two of them, congratulating them. Next, it was the start of a beautiful night. The young, beautiful, and low-level vampires loved such occasions the most. Because here, they could see many adults that they would never see on a normal day. If he was lucky enough to have a good time with those big shots, and if they were happy, they would take him under their wings. That would be equivalent to reaching the heavens in a single bound. Gu Shengyin was dragged outside by Wei Xingliang to the rooftop of the castle. Gu Shengyin looked at him in confusion. Based on her understanding of this man, he definitely wouldn't waste such a beautiful night like this. "What are you doing here?" Soon, Wei Xingliang told her what he wanted to do. He took her hand and led her to the highest point in the city. Tonight's weather was very good, and the sky was full of stars. It is said that people who kiss under the meteor will be blessed by the stars, and will never be separated. His deep voice was like the most beautiful and mellow instrument. "I, Wei Xingliang, never believed in such things, but in Luo for you, I am willing to try." Gu Shengyin closed her eyes, and a cool touch greeted her. Behind them, endless stars fell from the sky. With the stars in the sky as proof, I, Wei Xingliang, and Wei Xing Luo, will never be separated. Chapter 1063. System, I've estimated that I'll be able to bring it back to life in at most 10 more worlds. Gu Shengyin tilted his head and looked at the frail little kingfisher in his palm. There was a hint of a smile in his voice. Whether it was the curled corners of her lips or the smile in her eyes, it was easy to see that she was very happy at this moment. Of course she was happy. She remembered that the system said that there were 2 conditions. First, she had to create a complete life. Second, she had to walk out of here with her own strength. She didn't know how long it would take to create a life and walk out of here. But one by one day, she would be able to walk out of here with her own strength, right? She felt that she was full of fighting spirit and energy. Let's go to the next world. System. Yes. Host. When he opened his eyes, Gu Shengyin felt pain coming from his elbows, knees, and other parts of his body. Was he injured? She looked around and found that she was in a very simple room. Other than the bed, there were only a few stools and a wooden table with a teapot on it. No matter how she looked at it, the owner of this room lived a very poor life. However, even though the room was simple, it wasn't sloppy. It wasn't something that was unbearable. Gu Shengyin started to accept the memory transfer of this world. The owner of this body was called Chu Feilwan, the princess of Chenza country. But this princess didn't like to dress up and preferred to be armed. She wasn't interested in the luxurious life in the palace, but she liked to play with swords and spears. She was the only daughter of the emperor of Chenza country. The emperor doted on her to the bone and naturally didn't want her to be unhappy. The usually wise and mighty emperor was unexpectedly willful for once. He hired the best martial arts teacher for his daughter and personally sent her to the battlefield when she was 18 years old. This was something that many people, including Chu Feilwan's mother, couldn't understand. The emperor said, "My daughter is an eagle that belongs to the sky. How can I disregard her wishes and lock her in a golden cage just because I am afraid that she will get hurt?" It was proven that Chu Feilwan was born to be on the battlefield. She had a good grasp of the battle situation and could often use strange moves to catch the enemy off guard. She had used a year's time and her military exploits to silence those people in the imperial court. She was Tianzai's goddess of war, and the emperor loved her like a treasure. He even said in front of the entire court, "This daughter of mine is a treasure bestowed to Tianzai by the heavens. If she is willing, I am willing to pass on the throne to her and let her become Tianzai's honorable empress." He said if Chu Failwan was willing. Everyone knew that Chu Failwan didn't want to get involved in the imperial court. She only liked to fight. She enjoyed the sense of accomplishment when she arranged her troops and led them to beat the enemy until they fled. Chu Failwan was 83 years old. She had led the soldiers of Chenza Kingdom through hundreds of battles. There were injuries, there were life and death situations, but there had never been a single defeat. This was a legend in itself. She was also the only woman in the history of Chenza country who was crowned as empress while she was a princess. The empress of Qingwan had lived through 3 dynasties, and all the emperors of the 3 dynasties regarded her as the indispensable pillar of the country. She was a woman who lived a more exciting life than men. Chapter 1064. Just by looking at the plot, Gu Shangyin felt a sense of yearning for this legendary woman. Such a woman was worthy of respect no matter what era she was in. However, a small accident completely disrupted Chu Failwan's life. In a war between Chenza country and Yunza country, Chu Failwan, as the commander of Chenza country, was ambushed by the enemy and accidentally fell off a cliff. Chu Failwan was the main character and was blessed by the heavenly Tao, so falling off a cliff would not kill her. She fell at a place called Mutu village at the foot of the mountain and was saved by a hunter. However, her head was hit and there was a blood clot in her brain, so she lost her memory temporarily. It was not a big deal. The villagers in the mountain were very simple and friendly to her, an outsider. She was supposed to recuperate in the mountain village for 2 months, then she would recover her memory in the 3rd month, say goodbye to them, and leave this place. And this experience would become an inconspicuous memory in her life. However, a person who was not supposed to be here appeared and turned this place into Chu Failwan's burial place. A girl from the modern world entered the body of a girl named Xiao. Gu Shangyin knew that this world was like a TV series to that outsider. Chu Failwan was the female lead of that TV series. That outsider died because the circuit in her house caught fire. Before she died, she was watching the TV series with Chu Failwan as the main character. That outsider did not know how she came to this world. The point was that when she came here and saw Chu Failwan, who was seriously injured and unconscious, she finally understood where she was. The outsider did not feel sad. On the contrary, she was very happy. She knew the whole story of this world and felt that she was blessed by the heavens to be able to come to this world. Could it be that she was the female lead in a time travel novel? In the beginning, she had planned to rely on Chu Failwan. After all, Chu Failwan was a princess, so the outsider wanted to rely on Chu Failwan to leave this place. However, although Chu Failwan had lost her memory, she was very sensitive to people's thoughts. She didn't know what this outsider was thinking, but she could keenly sense that he didn't have any good intentions towards her. The outsider wanted to please Chu Failwan but failed, so he started to feel resentful. In addition, Chu Failwan was seriously injured and looked weak and pale. She actually had a vicious thought in her mind. That outsider was a surgeon in the modern world. Through some kind of luck, he obtained a medical manual left behind by the legendary ghost doctor, which recorded all kinds of strange and cruel methods. One of them was to change his face. Although it was called changing one's face, it was actually changing one's face in the way one wanted through surgery and drugs. It was a long process, and Chu Failwan had only stayed here for 3 months. The goal of the outsiders was to make him Chu Failwan. When Chu Failwan was still recovering from her injuries, she secretly killed her and peeled off her face meticulously. Then, she took Chu Failwan's body away and left the place. Chapter 1065. Chu Failwan was originally an outsider, so when she suddenly disappeared, the people in the village would at most find it strange. It was very dangerous in the forest, so they would not take the risk to look for an outsider. Xiao was a girl, so her status in the family was not as high as her 2 younger brothers. Her parents did not like her, so they went out to look for her, but did not find her, so they left her alone. The outsider who had taken over Xiao's body found a place to hide in the forest for a period of time, and wore Chu Failwan's human skin mask on her face. Then, she was found by the people of Tianzi country who came to look for her. That outsider pretended to lose her memory, and fooled them for a period of time. She turned herself into Chu Failwan. In this way, Chu Failwan was still the legendary princess, but no one knew that the real princess's body had been exposed in the wilderness, and even her soul could not rest in peace. Knock, knock, knock. Gu Xingyi's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She came back to her senses, and saw a thin figure pushing the door open and walking in. She was just thinking about her, and here she was. Ah! Xiao was startled by the cold gaze of the woman on the bed. Gu Shengyin quickly came back to her senses, and realized that she had been affected by the plot, and could not control her emotions towards this woman. That's right, this woman was the outsider who had taken over Xiao's body. She adjusted her state of mind, and her eyes regained their usual calmness and coldness. "Who are you?" she asked. Xiao was a little confused and excited at the same time. When she had just transmigrated to this world, she had broken down when she saw the environment in her house, and found out that she had come to a remote mountain village. Others transmigrated to princesses, daughters of noble families, and strong women, but why did she transmigrate to a poor peasant girl? But when she found out that she was called Xiao, had 2 younger brothers, and that there was a hunter named Shi Lei in this mountain village, her mind became active. All these were so similar to the TV series she had just watched. Especially when Xiao's mother said this morning that Big Stone had found a girl covered in blood in the mountains. This was obviously the plot of Qingwan King. Axiu was pleasantly surprised. She felt that she seemed to have found a way to leave this place. That was the legendary princess. If she remembered correctly, she would be found by Tianzi's people in 2 months and leave this place. If he could win her favor and then show her his unique medical skills, it would definitely arouse her interest. If that was the case, why would he have to worry about not being able to leave this damned place? The more Axiu thought about it, the more excited she became. She rushed here excitedly without even having lunch. Who would have thought that at first glance, she would be frightened by the coldness and killing intent in his eyes? As expected of someone who had been on the battlefield, Axiu thought. Then, she was attracted by that person's appearance. She had watched the TV series before. The female lead, Chu Failwan, was the most popular actress at the moment. Of course, she was beautiful. After all, Chu Failwan, the Queen of Qingwan, was the most beautiful woman in the 5 continents and 12 countries. She was beautiful enough to topple cities. However, when she saw her in person, she finally understood why she was the #1 beauty in the 5 continents and 12 countries. 4 chapters. There are still 4 chapters left. See you tonight. Chapter 1066. This woman, even if she was wearing the rough cotton clothes of a peasant woman in the mountains, because she was lying in bed, there were no hairpins in her hair, and there was no makeup on her face, she, as a woman, was stunned at first sight. How could there be such a perfect appearance in the world? Even if she was looking at her expressionlessly, she would not feel uncomfortable. Beauties always had unlimited privileges. She smiled. I heard from my mother that Brother Dashi saved a girl, so I came to see her. The Brother Dashi she mentioned was Shi Lei, the man who saved Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin did not have a good impression of this woman at all, so when he heard her say such words, he immediately retorted, "So, you're done now? Can you leave now? I'm injured now, and the owner of this house is not at home, so I can't entertain you." She chased her away in an obvious way. Xiao's face changed. She did not expect Chu Failwan to speak so rudely, but she still had her own purpose. She pretended that she did not understand Gu Shengyin's words, but widened her eyes and showed an envious look, saying, "Sister, you're so beautiful. I've never seen a woman more beautiful than you. I'm Xiao, a peasant in this mountain. Sister, what's your name?" Although she already knew in her heart, she still wanted to confirm if this person was really Chu Failwan. Gu Shengyin was very cooperative. My head is injured, so I don't remember anything in the past. When Axiu heard this, she finally set her mind at ease. Although she was very willing to stay and talk to Gu Shengyin was not very cooperative. Besides, Gu Shengyin's face was pale and bloodless. Xiao knew that if she disturbed her too much, it would make her feel disgusted, so she had to go out unhappily. Not long after she left, the owner of this house came back. At the first sight of Shirley, Gu Shengyin's eyes lit up. This man's figure was very strong, and his skin was a healthy bronze color due to years of sun exposure. Now that it was spring, the thin spring shirt could not hide the powerful muscles on his arms. The man had thick eyebrows and big eyes. Although he could not be considered handsome, he had a heroic and masculine aura. He was an unyielding man. Anyone who saw this man for the first time would have such an adjective in their mind. Most importantly, Gu Shengyin sensed a familiar aura from him. However, when this tall and handsome man saw Gu Shengyin, he stuttered, You're awake?" He seemed to be at a loss. When he saw Gu Shengyin looking at him coldly, he became even more flustered. When I went out to hunt last night, I happened to see you fainted in the forest, so I carried you back." After he finished speaking, he noticed that Gu Shengyin was still looking at him without saying anything. He blushed. "Don't worry, I didn't sleep in this house last night. I also asked the neighbor, Aunt Zhang, to change your clothes for you." Okay, I know." Gu Shengyin finally spoke. "Thank you." Even if she was thanking him, she did not show any extra expression on her face. Seeing that Gu Shengyin had finally spoken, Shirley finally heaved a sigh of relief. He did not care about her indifference. It was reasonable for such a girl to be a little wary when she was brought home by a strange man. Chapter 1067. Gu Shengyin wanted to laugh when she saw him like that. But she had to hold it in. Chu Failwan's character was cold and arrogant. She was always cold and indifferent to people she wasn't close to. She looked down and saw Shirley holding a basket in his hand. Seeing her look, Shirley remembered why he was here. He quickly took the basket in his hand. "You must be hungry after lying down for so long. This is the porridge I made. I put some mountain delicacies and wild bird meat in it. It's delicious. Have a taste," Shirley said excitedly. After a while, he realized that she did not say anything. He smiled awkwardly. Gu Shengyin looked at him and said in a low voice, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Shirley grinned. Gu Shengyin lowered her head and ate the porridge slowly. Her movements were slow and elegant. Shirley's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He never knew that there was someone who could make porridge look so good. He always felt that when this young lady held it like this, his coarse porcelain bowl seemed to have become more precious. She looked so good, and her movements were so— what was the word again? The teacher in the village taught him. Yes, her movements were so elegant. This girl must be from a big family in the big city. Shirley was confused when he remembered how she was lying there covered in blood. He did not know how she fell down the cliff. Coincidentally, the silver armor on Chu Failwan's body fell off when she fell off the cliff. That was why no one in the village thought that she was involved in the war. After Gu Shengyin finished the porridge, Shirley took the bowl and asked her if she wanted more. Gu Shengyin shook her head. Although the porridge smelled good and she was hungry, she had not eaten for a few days. It was better not to eat too much. "May I know my savior's name?" she asked. Shirley was stunned for a moment before he realized that she was asking for his name. He sighed inwardly. This girl was different. Even her words were so elegant. He replied, "My name is Shirley, the lay from the 3 stones. Others call me Big Stone, you can also call me Stone. Don't call me your benefactor. We mountain people don't like that." Gu Shengyin lowered her head and said, "You saved my life. Since you don't want me to call you benefactor, how about I call you Big Brother Shir?" Shirley grinned, revealing his white teeth. That works too. This lady was so polite. Could it be that her cold appearance was due to her personality? He thought for a moment and asked, "Then, how should I address you, miss?" Gu Shengyin was stunned. Then, Shirley saw the person in front of him frown, as if he was very troubled. Gu Shengyin looked at Shirley and said, "To be honest, Big Brother Shir, I don't remember anything after I woke up here. I don't even know my name." Hearing this, Shirley's heart was filled with pity. What a pitiful girl. Not only did she not know why she fell from such a high mountain, but she had also lost her memory after much difficulty. That was really. He originally wanted to say something, but when the time came, he forgot what it was. Sure enough, she was not well educated. At this moment, Shirley realized his shortcomings. He thought for a moment and said, "You can't remember your name, but you should have a name." Chapter 1068. Suddenly he thought of something and said to Gu Shengyin, "Wait a moment." Then Gu Shengyin saw him get up and bend down, seemingly taking out a small wooden box from under the bed. The wood was still very new. Apparently the box had just been made. Shirley opened the box and handed it to Gu Shengyin. Inside was a milky white jade pendant and a white jade hairpin of the same color. "These are your things. I made the decision to keep them for you. There is a word engraved on the jade pendant. See if you can remember anything." Gu Shengyin stretched out her hand and picked up the jade pendant. Shirley looked at it and felt that her pale hand was even whiter than the jade pendant. On the jade pendant, there was a word Luan engraved neatly. Gu Shengyin knew what this jade pendant represented. Every member of the royal family of Tianzhe country was born with a jade pendant that symbolized their status. The word engraved on the jade pendant was their name. She gently stroked the word with her hand and said softly, "I still can't remember, but there is a word Luan on it. Big Brother Shi, you can call me a Luan in the future." Luan, Luan. Shirley repeated it twice and said with a smile, "This name sounds good, I'll call you a Luan." Gu Shengyin's eyes flashed with a trace of smile. In the following days, Shirley punctually brought food to Gu Shengyin at mealtime every day. He would not stay here for too long. After all, a man and a woman were alone. Shirley was also afraid that it would ruin Gu Shengyin's reputation. But a Xiu would come over to take a look when she was free. Even if Gu Shengyin had made it very obvious that she did not like to see her, a Xiu always pretended not to see her. This day, when Shirley entered the door, he happened to see a Xiu going out. The moment he entered the door, he saw the tired look on Gu Shengyin's face. He also knew that a Xiu came to his house every day. "What's wrong? Did Xiu disturb your rest?" "I'll talk to Auntie Zhou later," he said. Gu Shengyin shook her head. "Don't. I can get out of bed in the next 2 days. If you have nothing to do, go out and get some sun." "It's not that she's disturbing me. It's just that Miss Xiu always likes to ask me some strange questions." Hearing the word strange, Shirley's expression changed. He hesitated for a moment and said to Gu Shengyin, "I've heard some rumors about Xiu. Logically speaking, I shouldn't say such things, but since you've encountered it, I'll give you a reminder." Gu Shengyin was very interested in this. Shirley said, "I heard from a Xiu's mother, Auntie Zhou, that a Xiu has been abnormal during this period. She used to be such a diligent girl, but now she doesn't sleep until late in the morning and doesn't get up. Auntie Zhou has to shout at her every day. When she gets up, she doesn't tidy up the house. When she eats, she dislikes this and that." He lowered his voice and said, "Auntie Zhou also said that her daughter might be possessed." Gu Shengyin understood in her heart. How could she be possessed? It was obvious that she was a different person. It seemed that a Xiu did not hide her nature at all in this mountain village. Perhaps in her heart, she would have to leave this place sooner or later. There was no need to waste energy on it. Chapter 1069. Gu Shengyin's prediction was right. This body's recovery ability was very strong. After a few days, she could get out of bed, but she couldn't do strenuous exercise. But at least she could help Shirley clean up the house. But to be honest, Gu Shengyin wasn't very good at these things. Shirley could clearly clean up the house in 2 or 3 moves, but if she did it herself, she would have to spend half a day. Shirley once saw this and laughed on the spot. Although I don't know what your identity is, but I think you must be a big family's young miss, so you definitely haven't done this kind of rough work before. Shirley laughed. Looking at Gu Xingyin's appearance, it was clear that she was a novice. Speaking of this, Gu Xingyin became angry. When she came to this world to draw skills, even a life skill would have been good, but what did she get in the end? Congratulations to the host for obtaining the weak and delicate, sickly beauty aura. When you show a delicate and pitiful appearance, you will automatically beautify yourself and obtain a beauty bonus effect. Gu Xingyin. She thought for a long time before she finally remembered where this so-called weak and delicate beauty aura came from. But, what was the use of this? She was Tianzai's goddess of war. Who would have thought that the Green Phoenix King would put on a pitiful look with a cold face? At this point, Gu Xingyin no longer had any hope for the skill draw. Back to the main topic. After confirming that she really wasn't good at cleaning up the house, Gu Xingyin turned her gaze to the kitchen. Fortunately, her cooking level was still there. The system gave her the maximum level of her cooking skill. So when Shirley came back from hunting one day and smelled the food coming out of his house, he thought that something had happened at home. Until the calm-faced Gu Xingyin came out with 2 dishes and put them on the table. "I've already finished cooking, come and eat." Shirley looked at the dishes with some surprise. Whether it was the smell or the color, they were quite enticing, feeling very novel. Gu Xingyin lightly said, "Today I saw that there was food in the kitchen, so I made some." The two of them washed their hands and started eating. When Shirley finished his bowl of rice and got up to refill his bowl, he turned around and glanced at Gu Xingyin, who was eating. Then, his face turned red. For some reason, he felt that this scene really looked like a family. Gu Xingyin glanced at the person who could still giggle while eating and did not say anything. Instead, Axiu came over right after the two of them finished their lunch. When she saw Gu Xingyin washing the dishes, she looked as if she had seen a ghost. How can you wash the dishes?" She was the famous Qing Wan king in the history of the Qing Wan dynasty, a princess with golden branches and jade leaves, yet she was washing dishes in such a small mountain village. Gu Xingyin looked at her strangely. "Miss Xiu's words are strange, why can't I wash the dishes?" Xiu's eyes widened. "But you, how can you wash the dishes?" Gu Xingyin paused and looked at Xiu indifferently. "I am? Does Miss Xiu know who I am?" Axiu quickly shook her head. "How can I know who you are? I just think that such a beautiful woman like you washing the dishes is an insult to her hands." Gu Xingyin lowered her head and looked at her hands. It turned out that washing dishes could be insulted. Shirley had been frowning and looking at this side. Seeing this, he said to Axiu, "Miss Xiu, I just heard Aunt Zhou calling you to go home. You should go back quickly, or you will be scolded later." The night watch ended. See you in the morning. Chapter 1070. Xiu's expression changed. She had been in this world for nearly a month. If she had to name one person she was afraid of, it must be Xiu's mother, Aunt Zhou. There was no other reason. Aunt Zhou's mouth was too powerful. As long as Axiu heard her name, her chubby face would immediately appear in her mind. She would have one hand on her waist and the other pointing at you with her index finger. Her small eyes were slightly narrowed, looking at you with a bit of disdain. When she opened her mouth, it was like a string of firecrackers. "You little b***tch that deserves to be hacked to death. You were born to be a ghost that wants to collect debts. This old lady works so hard to raise you up, one mouthful at a time, one mouthful at a time, one mouthful at a time, not to let you." Thinking of this, Xiu couldn't help but shiver. It was too scary. She quickly got up and walked out. "Big Stone, Miss Luan, I'll go back first." Seeing her figure run away, Gu Xingyin wiped the dishes in her hands and put them away. She turned back and asked Shirley, "You lied to her?" Shirley didn't expect to be seen through at a glance. He was obviously a little embarrassed. He smiled a little embarrassedly. "I saw that she had been pestering you endlessly. I saw that you had been enduring for a long time and didn't say anything for the sake of your face. Even Shirley could see through it. Gu Shengyin thought that she had made it very obvious. But Xiu pretended to be stupid. Especially, didn't the plot say that she was a surgeon? Gu Shengyin had been injured for so long, but she had never heard her say anything like what she should pay attention to. It was obvious that she only wanted benefits but didn't want to pay at all. Since ancient times, sincerity was exchanged for sincerity. But she had never heard of a saying that one could exchange for sincerity with one's mouth. But Shirley looked at Gu Shengyin and agreed with Xiu's words in his heart. I think there are some parts of what she said are right. People like Luan are not suitable for this kind of work. Shirley said seriously to Gu Shengyin. What's wrong? Gu Shengyin asked curiously. Shirley frowned and seemed to be thinking hard about something. When I was young, I once heard an old teacher tell a story in class. It was about an emperor who obtained a fairy-like beauty. In order to keep that beauty and make her happy, he used gold to build a palace for her. Every day, he raised her with all kinds of precious jewels, beautiful clothes, and unparalleled delicacies. Shirley looked at Gu Shengyin and blushed. I don't know how beautiful the fairy-like beauty in the story is, but I think Luan is even prettier than the fairy-like beauty in my imagination. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but laugh when she heard this. It turned out that the story of keeping a mistress in a golden house also existed in this world. She was so happy because of this alternative version of the story that she did not notice that Shirley was staring at this rare beauty with a smile. Shirley felt his heart beating very fast. Even when he was fighting against the strongest wild boar in the forest, he was not this excited. When his mother was still alive, she once touched little Shirley's hair and told him the story of the cowherd and the Vega in the sky. In the story, when the cowherd saw the Vega, his heart beat very fast, as if it was going to jump out of his chest in the next moment. His mother said that the cowherd was moved by the fairy-like beauty in the sky. Chapter 1071. If the cowherd fell in love with the fairy in the sky, what about himself? If the cowherd ended up marrying the fairy in the sky, what about himself? Shirley clutched his chest and silently glanced at Gu Shengyin, who still had a smile on her face. He lowered his head sadly. Such a beautiful Alwan, it was impossible to stay in this forest, right? She would eventually return to the big city. At that time, there would also be people who would build a palace with gold for her, using countless precious jewels and beautiful clothes, just to make her smile. How could she still remember the silent and mute big rock in this desolate mountain forest? Gu Shengyin sensitively sensed that he seemed to be in low spirits. She withdrew her smile and looked at Shirley with concern. What's wrong with you? Shirley shook his head. He did not know how to hide his emotions. Even if he wanted to smile, he could not. I'm fine. He hurriedly left this sentence and turned to leave the house, as if there was a scourge behind him. Gu Shengyin looked strangely at Shirley, who suddenly became gloomy and left, and asked curiously, Did something happen that I did not notice? The system, who saw all this, also did not understand what happened and replied, I don't understand. Host, the human emotional world is the most complicated thing. Even if the most precise calculation is activated, it will not be able to analyze anything. Gu Shengyin gave up on discussing emotions with the system. For the next 2 days, Gu Shengyin felt that Shirley was avoiding her. In the past, he would sit with her for a while after dinner. Although they did not talk much, the atmosphere between them was not bad. But now, Shirley would still come back on time for dinner, but he would not take the initiative to talk. He seemed to have really become a silent rock. Gu Shengyin did not ask him about it. She asked the system, and nothing happened to him. So, was he unhappy because of her? Fortunately, on the 3rd day, Shirley seemed to have changed back to the previous Shirley. He seemed to have figured something out. He no longer avoided Gu Shengyin's eyes, and the smile on his face increased. The system expressed that the human world was indeed too complicated. It really didn't understand. Gu Shengyin also expressed that even after being a person from so many worlds, she still couldn't understand human emotions. Another piece of good news for Gu Shengyin was that Xiao had not come for 2 days. Gu Shengyin was overjoyed when he heard the system's feedback. It turned out that it was Auntie Zhou, Xiao's mother. She insisted that her daughter must have been possessed by something strange. Otherwise, how could she explain why her obedient and hard-working daughter suddenly became a lazy and evil girl who even talked back to her mother? She specially killed a chicken and invited the most famous witch in the village, Wang Pe, to exorcise the evil spirit for Xiao. But how could there be a real witch in this world? That old lady Wang usually relied on tricking the villagers to make a living. But Axiu suffered. She was held down and beaten with a chicken feather blanket. It was called beating ghosts. Then, she was closed and drank 2 big bowls of ash water, and even drank a mouthful of rooster blood. After being tormented like this, Axiu was completely obedient. No matter what she thought in her heart, at least on the surface, she finally changed back to the hard-working, obedient, well-behaved and shy Axiu. Chapter 1072. Just like that, a month passed by peacefully. Gu Shengyin could feel that her injuries were almost healed. She didn't like to go out since she stayed in the village every day. The reason was simple. This village was almost isolated from the rest of the world. No one had come here for decades. Now there was a stranger, and a beautiful girl that no one in the village had ever seen. Every time Gu Shengyin went out, the whole village would stand to the side and look at him as if they were looking at a rare object. It was really awkward. Now that she had finally recovered, there was still more than a month before the people of Qianzi country came to find her and she recovered her memory. Gu Shengyin was thinking about how to make Shi Lei agree to take her out to hunt. When Shi Lei came back, he saw Gu Shengyin standing in the yard. He had exchanged a leopard skin for the clothes she was wearing from Auntie Zhang's house in the village. The material was light blue, and there wasn't even a pattern on it. However, Gu Shengyin just stood there quietly without any makeup on, making the winter jasmine that peeked in from the side of the fence lose its color. Alwan, what are you thinking about? Shi Lei now got along with Gu Shengyin much more naturally. He thought it through. Anyway, it was impossible for him and Alwan to be together. Then he would take care of her while she stayed in the village. At least, he could leave a good memory for himself. Gu Shengyin turned around and looked at Shi Lei. I seem to have remembered something just now. Shi Lei was delighted. You remembered? Gu Shengyin shook her head. Just a fragmented memory. She suddenly stretched out her hand and broke off the flower branch beside her. Then, with a shake of her wrist, she suddenly drew a beautiful sword flower. Shi Lei stared at her with his eyes wide open. This, if he didn't see wrong, what was that? He clearly felt a murderous aura from the seemingly weak flower branch. I think I know some martial arts. Martial arts. Shi Lei's eyes lit up. Men like them who lived in the mountains relied on brute force to hunt. How could they learn any martial arts? Regardless of whether it was martial arts or books, they were all extremely luxurious and rare items to them. Gu Shengyin's eyes swept over his strong body, and her eyes lit up. Why don't we compare notes? Shi Lei looked at her slender body and hesitated. That's not good, is it? Gu Shengyin's eyes turned cold. Are you looking down on me? Since she had already said so, what could Shi Lei do? He obediently put down the things in his hands and prepared to spar with her. Shi Lei had originally thought that he was just playing with Alwan, so he had held back a little. However, the moment he started fighting, he realized that he had completely underestimated the woman in front of him. A delicate flower branch had become an omnipotent weapon in her hands. Every time the flower branch attacked him at a very tricky angle, it was impossible for him to guard against it. Then, when he was not paying attention, it would hit him without leaving a trace. The force was not strong, but it was always enough to make him shrink back in pain. How is it? Gu Shengyin withdrew her hand and asked. The flower branch in her hand had already become a bare branch. The petals on it could not bear the force when she hit him and scattered all over the ground. Alwan is so powerful, Shirley's eyes sparkled. He was not angry at all that he had been hit so many times. Chapter 1073. Gu Shengyin slowly calmed her breathing. She had rested for such a long time, so she still couldn't get used to this sudden change. Gu Shengyin looked at him. Do you want to learn? Why wouldn't he want to? Shirley nodded repeatedly. Alwan was so weak, but she always caught him off guard. He had brute force, but it was useless against Alwan. No matter how strong you are, it's useless if you can't hit someone, right? Then I can teach you. Gu Shengyin agreed readily. In her heart, there was nothing that she couldn't share with the person in front of her. Shirley hesitated. I heard that things like martial arts, like learning, can't be taught to outsiders. Gu Shengyin glanced at him. This person was too honest. She said lightly, It's not taught to outsiders. You're not an outsider. Shirley blushed again because of her words. Alwan said that he wasn't an outsider. Did that mean that in her heart, she also... Stop. He forced himself to calm down. Shirley, don't think too much. That will never belong to you. If there was no hope, there would be no disappointment. To Gu Shengyin's surprise, when she proposed to go hunting with Shirley, the other party didn't object and directly nodded in agreement. She felt that it was strange. After more than a month of getting along, she was very sure that the other party cared about her very much. But if he cared about her, why did he dare to let her go hunting with him? It was such a dangerous thing. Shirley's answer was simple. I've been hunting in this forest since I was young, so I'm very familiar with it. There aren't any powerful beasts. Usually, I can handle it alone. Alwan, you're so powerful. How could anything happen to you? So he was so sure of her strength. The next day, Gu Shengyin tied a dagger to her waist and carried a bow on her back. She set off with Shirley. When the villagers saw them, especially Gu Shengyin's outfit, they were very surprised. Some people even asked on the spot. When they learned that Gu Shengyin was going out to hunt, several people laughed out loud. First Aunt Zhou said in a particularly loud voice, Hunting has always been a man's business since ancient times. Why are you, a woman, joining in the fun? Moreover, what can a delicate girl like you do there? When the time comes, Big Stone will have to take care of you while hunting. Tell me, what are you thinking? She didn't finish her sentence because Gu Shengyin glanced at her. When eldest Aunt Zhou was swept by that gaze, she felt as if her throat was suddenly choked by something. She could not say another word. She was clearly such a delicate girl, and she didn't have any fierce expression. With just a faint glance, eldest Aunt Zhou felt as if she had suddenly fallen into an ice cave in the cold winter. She raised her head and looked at the sun in the sky. Could it be that the sun was too bright today and she was hallucinating? Gu Shengyin finally knew why Xiao hated this eldest Aunt Zhou so much. Her mouth was really unpleasant. When Gu Shengyin saw that eldest Aunt Zhou had shut up, she nodded with satisfaction and said, I've never heard of a rule that says women can't hunt. There's also no rule that says women need men to protect them. The surrounding villagers who were watching the fun all shut their mouths. They silently watched the two people walk into the dense forest behind the mountain village. See you during the day. Good night. In addition, I'm asking for a wave of usual votes. Chapter 1074. Gu Shengyin and Shirley walked into the forest. After coming out of the mountain village, Shirley did not speak, which made Gu Shengyin feel a little strange. She turned her head and found that he had been looking at her with sparkling eyes. Gu Shengyin was a little amused. She asked, Why are you looking at me like that? Shirley's face suddenly turned red when he was caught peeping at her. He stammered, No, nothing. I was just thinking about what Luan said just now. I think it's very novel and reasonable. Such words were probably the most honest and sincere praise from a man living in the mountains. Gu Shengyin's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to tease him. Oh. Then tell me, what's the reason? Shirley's face turned even redder when he heard this. He didn't know what the reason was. He simply felt that Luan was different from the women in the mountain village. This difference was not only referring to her rare beauty and elegant behavior, but also to what she did and what she said. Shirley couldn't explain it, but he just felt that Luan was different from others. He shook his head and said, "I can't explain it." Then he looked at Gu Shengyin and said seriously, "But I just think what Luan said is very reasonable. If what she said didn't make sense, why couldn't those people in the mountain village refute her words?" Shirley's ears were red as he thought about it. Gu Shengyin looked at his honest appearance and his heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to say something, his ears twitched. Shirley also seemed to have noticed something. He was about to say, "There's prey coming." Then he saw the woman beside him turn her left hand and the long bow on her back was already in her hand. She neatly nocked an arrow with her right hand. Almost at the same time, the arrow flew out like lightning in a certain direction. In the dense forest where the branches and leaves were trembling, there was the scream of an animal. They rushed over and saw that the arrow that Gu Shengyin had just shot was firmly stuck in a pheasant. The pheasant was not completely dead. Half of its body was stained with blood, and its body was still twitching and struggling. Gu Shengyin saw this and stepped forward to lift the pheasant up. She neatly twisted its neck and pulled the arrow out. Then, she turned around and met Shirley's dumbfounded gaze. "What's wrong? Are you frightened by me?" she asked. Shirley came back to his senses and looked at the pheasant in Gu Shengyin's hand. He still couldn't believe it. No, I just didn't expect. Luan, you are really amazing." Shirley looked at Gu Shengyin his eyes. How could there be a woman like Luan in this world? She was so beautiful, she could reason, she knew martial arts, and she was so good at archery. Shirley lowered his head and thought about it carefully. Compared to Luan, he was a grown man, but he couldn't compare to her at all. As he thought of this, he felt dejected again. People in the mountains were simple and honest and didn't know how to hide their thoughts. He felt dejected and his face showed a sense of loss. Gu Shengyin looked at him and it wasn't difficult to guess what he was thinking. She comforted him. "Although I don't remember anything, look at my martial arts and archery. I must have hired a famous teacher to teach me. You relied completely on your talent. The two can't be compared." Although Shirley felt that Luan's words were a bit awkward, he could still hear that she was comforting him. Luan was really a very good woman, he thought. Chapter 1075. Gu Shengyin looked at Shirley, who had everything written on his face, and only felt that it was very interesting. She had seen his domineering, cold, and arrogant look many times, but this time, she felt that it was very fresh. It was also the easiest to get along with such a person. Shirley put the pheasant that Gu Shengyin had caught into the basket on his back, and the two of them continued to walk forward. Hunters relied on this forest to make a living, and also relied on the weather to make a living. Now was a good time, of course, they had to store more food, otherwise, when the season of rain and snow came, life would not be easy. Then, Gu Shengyin saw that she had just praised Shirley's talent. When he found the wild beast, Shirley's face lit up. This forest was closer to the mountain village, and it was not deep into the forest, so it was rare to encounter such a large wild beast. But it was too dangerous deep in the mountains, and only when the village was really short of food, would a few strong hunters form a team and go further into the mountains to search for food. Of course, Shirley would not go to such a dangerous place with Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin looked at the wild beast carefully a few times, and found that she did not recognize it. It looked similar to the wild boar in her impression, but it did not have many spikes on its body like the wild boar. The moment she found the wild beast, Gu Shengyin shot the arrow in her hand. But she did not know what material the wild beast's fur was made of, and even with her strength, the arrow could not penetrate it. Even if it had something to do with the fact that Shirley's self-made arrow was not sharp enough. The wild beast's fur was also stronger than any animal that Gu Shengyin had seen before. Then, when Gu Shengyin was still thinking of a way to get rid of this prey, Shirley had already put down the bough in his hand and pounced on it. Gu Shengyin was shocked. She knew that Shirley only had brute strength, and was afraid that he would get hurt on impulse. Then, she saw a scene that made her eyes widen uncontrollably. Shirley actually used the strength of his two hands to grab the wild beast's front and back legs, and lifted it up. Gu Shengyin, she silently glanced at the beast. It seemed to be at least 500 or 600 pounds. Looking at Shirley's appearance again, he couldn't see the slightest bit of reluctance on his face when he lifted the beast. After that, she watched as Shirley exerted force with both hands and threw the wild beast out. The wild beast flew out and crashed into a tree, breaking a tree that was about 10 inches wide. The beast let out a sound similar to an anguished wail. Its movements were somewhat sluggish as it got up and ran towards the forest. Obviously, it understood that its opponent was not a simple character and planned to escape. But now that he finally saw such a big prey, how could Shirley let it escape? His eyes were burning with fighting spirit as he chased after the wild beast. An injured beast was also a hunter with great strength. Gu Shengyin didn't even need to look to guess the outcome. She watched as Shirley tied up the beast with a rope and dragged it on the ground. The corner of the beast's mouth was full of blood, and it was no longer breathing. Alwan. Shirley smiled, revealing his white teeth. We have a great harvest today. We can go back early. It was indeed a great harvest. Gu Shengyin glanced at the huge beast and estimated that according to their appetite, if they ate it every day, it would be enough to last them for at least 2 months. Chapter 1076. When the two of them dragged the beast back, they attracted a crowd of onlookers in the village. Aunt Zhou seemed to have forgotten what happened in the morning. She looked at the big beast in Shirley's hand enviously. She opened her mouth and said, let me see. What did this big stone bring back? It's so big. It must be bigger than dumb insect, right? I'm afraid that the two of you can't finish this meat, right? Our man hasn't come back today. I don't know if he can get enough food for our family today. Did she mean that she wanted a share of the soup? However, when Shirley heard this, he immediately laughed. Aunt Zhou, it just so happens that I can't finish this thing. Why don't? Gu Shengyin saw the joy in Aunt Zhou's eyes. She faintly continued the conversation. Why don't we dry and marinate the meat? It can be stored for a long time. We can eat it slowly. Aunt Zhou's smile suddenly froze on her face. Shirley looked at Gu Shengyin with some confusion. He didn't understand why she suddenly spoke. However, when she said this, Shirley swallowed back the words that he wanted to say. Could it be that Alwan liked to eat this beast's meat? He thought about it. Since Alwan liked it, then he wouldn't share it with Aunt Zhou's family. What if Alwan didn't have enough to eat? Let's go back. Gu Shengyin said to Shirley. I'm a little tired today. When he heard Gu Shengyin say that she was tired, Shirley didn't care about anything else. He hurriedly asked nervously, Tired? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Does the wound still hurt? Let's go back quickly. The two of them talked to each other like this and forgot about First Aunt Zhou. First Aunt Zhou's fat face was very interesting. Her lips trembled and she turned around to see Xiao looking at them from the gate. She finally scolded with a trembling voice, Shameless lowly wench, a loser who lives off a woman. I think you can only rely on men to support you in the future. Xiao silently listened to this woman's abuse. After these few days, she was used to this woman. As long as this woman was unhappy, she would come back and use her as a punching bag. Anyway, in her eyes, her daughter was born to collect debts, wasn't she? Axiu also knew who she really wanted to scold. However, she didn't dare to scold that person, so she could only use herself to scold him indirectly. Why was it that even though he had transmigrated, he was still the one being oppressed and bullied? Axiu didn't believe it. She didn't believe that she had transmigrated just to live a hard life in a mountain village. She also did not believe that she would live in such a small village for the rest of her life, marry an illiterate mountain man in a few years, and then live in such a small place for the rest of her life. She used to think that she could rely on Chu Fail-wan to get out, but Chu Fail-wan didn't even want to talk to her. In that case, he could only think of a way himself. She slowly lowered her eyes. Eldest Aunt Zhou got angry when she saw her like this. Although her daughter had been more obedient recently, her personality had become more and more gloomy. Finally, she had a sullen face. No one knew what she was thinking about. It made people panic when they saw her. "Why are you standing here like a block of wood? Have you washed the clothes at home? Have you peeled the corn in the yard? Do you really think you're a female bodhisattva? As long as you sit and don't do any work, the house doesn't raise idle people." Chapter 1077. Does Alwan like to eat wild beast meat? Shirley asked. Gu Shengyin turned her head strangely. She didn't understand why he asked this question. Looking at her expression, Shirley knew that he was probably wrong. He explained embarrassedly, "When I heard you say that, I thought you liked to eat this meat very much." Gu Shengyin connected the dots and understood what Shirley meant. He thought that she liked to eat this wild beast meat, so he didn't want her to share it with others? Gu Shengyin. No, I've never seen such a wild beast. Shirley didn't understand. If that's the case, why? At this moment, the two of them had returned to Shirley's yard. Shirley put down the game in his hand. Gu Shengyin said lightly, "Nothing. I just feel that it's a waste to give the game you worked so hard to catch to someone like that." Shirley turned his head to look at her. Gu Shengyin had been here for more than a month, but she had never seen Aunt Zhou take out anything from home to give Shirley. Even if he was injured, Shirley would ask Aunt Zhang, who was far away from home, for help, not Aunt Zhou, who was just a fence away. This showed that in Shirley's heart, he knew who would really help him. Today, listening to the conversation between Aunt Zhou and Shirley, and hearing Aunt Zhou's familiar tone, Gu Shengyin knew that she had done this kind of thing often. And looking at Shirley's appearance, he had probably never refused her. But Gu Shengyin didn't see any gratitude to Shirley from Aunt Zhou. For some people, if you were good to them, they wouldn't be able to return the same kindness. On the contrary, you would raise their hearts and make them want to bite a bigger piece of meat from you all the time. Aunt Zhou was such a person. Gu Shengyin always kept a respectful distance from such people. However, Shirley suddenly laughed. Gu Shengyin looked at him inexplicably. She did not understand what was wrong with this man all of a sudden. Shirley looked at her and said with a smile, "Actually, I know what Alwan said. I know what kind of person Aunt Zhou is. I don't expect her to remember my good deeds and help me when there's a problem. It's just that I feel that I'm still young and strong. I can't finish all these things anyway." Gu Shengyin said, "Then clean it up and send it to Auntie Zhang and Uncle Wang at the entrance of the village." The smile on Shirley's face never faded. "Okay." The few families that Alwan mentioned would always remember to leave a portion for him whenever they had something. Shirley was very happy. Alwan was speaking up for him. She was thinking for him. Did this mean that he had some status in her heart? After all, if she really didn't care, she wouldn't be afraid of being taken advantage of, nor would she care about how she dealt with her own things. Gu Shengyin watched Shirley slaughter the prey, wash it, cut the meat into large pieces, strung it with a straw rope and dried it in the yard. Then, he carried a basket with some meat in it and went to deliver things to people. Before he left, he had already cleaned the yard and was especially careful to move out a bench for Gu Shengyin so that she could lie down and bask in the sun for a while. However, Gu Shengyin didn't enjoy the spring sunshine for long before an unexpected guest came to the yard. Today's night watch ends at 8 o'clock. See you in the morning. Have a good weekend, everyone. Chapter 1078. Miss Luan. The person who came was a Xiao, whom she had not seen for a long time. Gu Shengyin raised her head to look at her. From the looks of it, a Xiao had not been living very well during this period of time. Her originally plump figure had now slimmed down, her face was somewhat haggard, and her eyes were gloomy. She did not even look as lively and cute as before. "What's the matter? Miss Xiu? The eldest brother of the Shi family is not home. If you want to find him, you can come back later," Gu Shengyin said lazily. Xiu looked at her with some jealousy. This woman, even if she was plotted against and fell off a cliff, even if she came to such an isolated and poor mountain village, she still lived so freely. Her face was rosy and her eyes were lazy. It was obvious that she was very satisfied with such a life. Xiu thought maliciously. If this woman knew what kind of life she was supposed to be living, would she still be so free? "I came here specially to find you, Miss Luan." Xiu looked at Gu Shengyin and said. Gu Shengyin looked at her. Her meaning was obvious. "If you have something to say it quickly." She was clearly standing and Gu Shengyin was half lying down, but Xiu always felt that the other party was looking down at her. Some people, even if they lost their memories, the pride and reserve engraved in their bones could not be erased. Xiu considered her words and said, "Miss Luan, you should know that you don't belong to this place. Look at your clothes and appearance. You should be in a big city, enjoying fine clothes and delicious food, and being served by groups of maidservants. You shouldn't be in a place like this, where you have to personally hunt and do things that a peasant woman would do." After she finished speaking, she looked at Gu Shengyin, waiting for her reaction. Unfortunately, Gu Shengyin did not give her any reaction. She said lazily, "Oh, perhaps. I don't remember anything." Xiu was furious when she heard this. How come she had never heard that the Qingwan king had such a lazy personality after losing her memories? Wasn't she supposed to be a domineering and cold beauty? She was unhappy in her heart, so her tone naturally carried a hint of disappointment. "You're living a leisurely life here, but do you know how many people are looking for you outside? Your family members must be very anxious right now. Don't you think about them?" Gu Shengyin's expression didn't even change when she heard this. "Thank you for worrying about me, Miss Xiu, but I don't have any memories of the past. Even if I want to go out, I don't know who to look for. It's better to recuperate first." Axiu. How could there be such a stubborn person in this world? But then again, how could a woman like the Green Phoenix King be so easily swayed by the words of others? After talking for a long time, Gu Shengyin didn't move at all. Xiu knew that her first plan had failed. But it didn't matter. She still had a second step. She said, "Miss Luan, I found a kind of herb today. It said that it's very effective in treating injuries and clearing blood stasis. Do you want to try it?" Gu Shengyin was a little amused. How could a village girl who had never learned medicine know medicine? It seemed that Xiu really couldn't help it. Chapter 1079. Gu Shengyin was about to refuse when Shi Lei, who went out to deliver something, came back. "Xiu, I watched you grow up. How come I don't know where you learned that medicinal herb?" Shi Lei looked a little bad. He was still carrying an empty basket in his hand. Gu Shengyin looked at it and saw that there seemed to be a fish jumping around in it. He wondered which family saw him send something over and gave him a gift in return. Xiu's eyes flashed when she saw Shi Lei. When she first came to this world, it was not that she did not have thoughts about Shi Lei. This man was handsome, had a good figure, and a good temper. If he was in the world she came from, he would definitely be the best choice for a good husband. But she finally gave up the idea. No matter what, he was just a mountain village hunter. It was impossible for her to stay in this place. When she went out, she would not be afraid that she could not find a better man. In her heart, she still looked down on people like Shi Lei who lived in the mountains. Hearing Shi Lei's words, she retorted with some indignation, "I learned it from the doctor at the entrance of the village." Shi Lei replied to her rudely, "I just came back from Uncle Wang and Dr. Li at the entrance of the village. Dr. Li did not tell me that he knew any medicinal herbs that could clear blood and remove blood stasis." His words made Xiu's face turn red and white. Shi Lei continued, "Xiu, Shi too has watched you grow up. I really don't know what's wrong with you recently. If you don't know something, don't talk nonsense. You can't talk about things that you've drunk. Be careful that Aunt Zhou will scold you again. Xiao saw that the two people did not believe her and heard Shirley mention Aunt Zhou. She knew that her plan was probably hopeless. She went out with a bad face. Shirley saw her leave and said to Gu Shengyin, I always feel that Xiao has been strange recently. If she says anything to you, you must not believe it. Gu Shengyin nodded. Don't worry. She changed the topic. I think that fish is quite fat. Where did it come from? Shirley glanced at it and said with a smile, Auntie Zhang gave me one of the fish her son caught in the river today. Let's have fish soup for lunch today. Gu Shengyin glanced at him. Did you get any gifts from Aunt Zhou's family in return? Shirley looked at her and smiled. I know. You don't look like such a petty person. Their relationship progressed very quickly. He could now speak to Gu Shengyin in such a relaxed tone. Based on Shirley's understanding of Alwan, she obviously didn't care about money and treasures. He didn't know why she was so against Aunt Zhou's family. Gu Shengyin glanced at him. Do you think I care about those pieces of meat? I just feel that since you've worked so hard to hunt this prey, why bother to pay respects to that ingrate? It was fine to say that she was narrow-minded or calculative, but she just didn't want to. Shirley continued to smile. I know. You're doing it for my own good. She clearly cared about him. How could Alwan be so considerate? Shirley thought happily in his heart. Sure enough, there was no woman better than Alwan in this world. The two of them happily drank a pot of fish soup, and the days passed leisurely and leisurely. Gu Shengyin calculated the time. Tianzi's people should find them in half a month. Her memory was about to be restored. Chapter 1080. Gu Shengyin went hunting with Shirley every day and only came back when it was time to eat. When she was at home, Shirley was also there, so Xiao didn't have a chance to look for her again. When the two of them returned to the courtyard, Gu Shengyin paused as soon as she entered the courtyard. She glanced around the entire courtyard without looking for traces. Shirley looked at her in confusion. What's wrong with Alwan? Gu Shengyin withdrew her gaze and said, Nothing. She put down the things in her hands and watched Shirley take the things to the river to wash. System, this courtyard has been tampered with. The system replied, Yes, host, there are a few herbs mixed in with the weeds by the fence. Gu Shengyin walked over and pushed the weeds aside. Sure enough, there were a few palm-sized green grasses growing inside. The grasses didn't look different from the surrounding grasses, but there were some spots growing on the edges of the leaves. Looking at it like this, it looked like ordinary grasses with worms growing on them. But it wasn't worms, it was the grass that originally grew like this. Moreover, Gu Shengyin recognized this herb. It was because she recognized this herb that she was a little curious about where Xiao found it. Poisonous wolf spot, an extremely rare poisonous herb. How poisonous was this herb? Not to mention that it could kill at the sight of blood. It even had a characteristic that the poison could spread through the air. It was fine to encounter it occasionally, but if it grew in the courtyard like now where people had to stay for a long time every day, then within 3 days, the people in the courtyard would have symptoms of dizziness, nausea and drowsiness. If it wasn't discovered and treated in time, it was likely that they would fall into a coma. And if it was directly taken by mouth, within 2 hours, the person's body would be covered with red spots, itching incessantly, and die of the poison. Gu Shengyin stared at the poisonous wolf spot for a while, then silently covered it with the weeds again. The next day, when she went hunting, she silently picked a few herbs from a place. She knew that there would be amaranth grass that could cure the poisonous wolf spot's poison. Shirley looked at the thing in her hand and felt a little strange. Why did you pick 2 stalks of grass? Gu Shengyin removed the soil from the roots and put the amaranth into the basket on her back. I recognize this. It's good for your health. It's easy for people to fall sick during this season. Let's boil this later tonight. We'll drink a bowl each. Shirley was silent for a moment. He lowered his head and asked, Alwan, during this period of time, I see that you are remembering more and more things. Are you about to remember the past? Gu Shengyin didn't understand the meaning behind his words. She nodded and said, I do remember a lot of things. I also know how to use some of the things I saw. However, I still can't remember the key things. I think it will take some time. Shirley replied with an "oh" to show that he understood and did not say anything. He should be happy. He had long known that Alwan was not from this place. She would leave this place one day, wouldn't she? Hearing the news that she was slowly recovering her memories, why was he not only unhappy, but also a little sad? It was probably because he was afraid that she would leave after remembering everything. She would leave this mountain village and return to her big city. He didn't know if Alwan would still remember him in the future. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.